Cool. Thanks, man. And you actually touched a little bit on what I want to kind of lead into here too, because I think this will be something that's hopefully valuable for not only newer people in Vegas there, but some of the veterans and things like that too. So when you're talking about attitude and kind of its importance, so I'm a pretty firm believer that, especially in both roles, so BD and sales, just in general, it's 90% attitude. So the other 10%, learning the script, how to do this or that, that's extremely important. But your motivation, your attitude, and things like that are going to end up probably dictating a lot more of your success than anything else. So one thing I wanted to touch on that I don't think we've really brought up much in meetings is just the idea of stories and the stories that you tell yourself in your head, because that kind of dictates your perspective. It dictates how you respond to things, right? So it's everything that's going around us. It's the meaning that we kind of give to the responses that we're getting from the receptionists or the decision makers. It's kind of it covers everything. So like just for example, so did the receptionist that you just spoke to, maybe they were rude, did they get that way because they're a jerk, which might be kind of the first thing there, or was it because you caught them at a bad time? And one of those stories, they're going to lead to you being fearless on the next round. One of those stories is going to lead you to not being beat down a little bit for your next BD call or your next sales call or whatever it is. But if you don't kind of actively take charge and understand what that is, you're probably going to sound a little bit less confident, right? You're probably going to be beaten down a little bit more there. So I think lots of people don't proactively think about the stories that are going on in their head. It's just kind of like leaving it up to that voice in your head too, which can actually be pretty negative. So when it comes to things like that, so if you don't have a story that you've kind of chosen, like what's the story that you're telling yourself about why you, if you're new, why you joined, if you're already here or you're new, what are you wanting to do? What are you wanting to advance and get from it? So how do you interpret all the little things that are happening that are going to influence your attitude, right? So are your struggles, are they a sign of difficulty? Like, do you interpret it as being beaten down or tired or out of it, or it's just like a bad day where you're tossing the full day out the window just because you had a handful of, poorly timed, rude receptionists? Or do you kind of see it as something that's outside of your control? Or do you have like kind of an empowering internal story, right? Do you think of it as I inevitably am going to come across these struggles, this friction, this discomfort? It's part of the job, and the more that you can embrace that, the more success that you'll see on both sides. And so I think a lot of it, like the metaphor that I have in my head for this is if you don't have a story for how you're encountering all of this, it's almost like being in like a river. Like if you have a solid story, like it's rock solid, like the water's going to kind of go around the rock, right? It's just rock solid. The water doesn't stop it. The environment just kind of goes around. But if you don't take charge and determine what your own story is in your head, it's almost like being a leaf, right? Like you have no control over the leaf. It's whatever the day gives you. That's where the stream's going. That's what's going to happen. You have no control and no influence over it. And I'll touch on two stories that I think tie into this, because I think most of the stories, when we don't take control of it in our head, it tends to go negative, right? Because we get tired as the day goes on, and it's easier to have those negative stories. But I think we also don't really fully appreciate our real capability. So I've told this story to at least probably a couple people. It's been a long time, but this first story, it's a little bit morbid, but I always think about it both in terms of life and capabilities and the story that you can tell yourself to kind of push through. And it actually goes back to the end of World War II and the Holocaust. So again, a little bit morbid there, but as the Allied forces were actually coming up and pushing forward within Germany with all the concentration camps for how long they've been going on for years, we've all seen the pictures, right, where it's people like literally on the verge of death even there. But the German troops had to make a decision to move all those people to a different camp. They couldn't, eliminate them all. They wanted more workers, and they literally had to take those people who are just skin and bones, and they had to run 100 miles. So I liken that to what's happening in the back of our head. Like when if we just go out for a jog or we're thinking about exercising or this or that, like we think, oh, we can't do this, oh, we have to slow down, oh, we have to do this or that. That's just like the natural voice in your head. But these people, they literally had a gun to their head. You wouldn't think they'd be able to run across the yard in a concentration camp. And a lot of them made it there too. So when you have that ultimate motivational factor, when it's your story is like, if you want to live, you want to push through, you're going to make it happen. And the funny thing too is, so the German troops were obviously a lot more in shape, but they rotated every 5 miles. So they would have some German troops that drove up in a car 5 miles down the line, and they would take their breaks too. So it just kind of shows like what the capabilities are. So when you think you're tired or you think this or that, like that voice in your head, I think it means well. I think it's just trying to get you to, save energy or avoid what might be seen as potential conflict. So like when you get the decision maker on the phone and they give you the objection, it's natural to want to avoid like a direct potential negative. It's tough to get that no, right? But the ratios are probably, you've got to talk to about 8 decision makers for every appointment that you're making there, which means you're getting 7 no's, you're getting 7 shutdowns. So what's the story that you're telling yourself there? Or are you dialing, taking more breaks or this or that, or is your tone a little bit off because, today's not my day, or nobody wants to talk to us today, or you can't do X, Y, Z. So that's a really important thing to touch on. And then just the last second quick story there is actually more of like a mantra from the Navy SEALs. So they're like one of the most elite military teams, and they would actually try to get to break people down physically, mentally, emotionally when they thought they couldn't do anything more. And their rule of thumb is you're actually at about 40% of your capacity there. So if when you're at your lowest, maybe it's a rough day, maybe you didn't get very much sleep, maybe you didn't get whatever. Again, do you have an empowering story to fall back on? So like, what is your story? Because I think that's going to influence those next follow-up calls. So you don't want to leave it up to chance that however you're treated in the morning is going to dictate the success of your full day, right? Sometimes we're going to have the worst, slowest, rudest start to a day or a week or whatever it might be. But if you actually take the time to think about it, and you don't have to share this because this can be a very personal story, and this doesn't just have to be work related. Like, what's your story for being a mother, a father, a spouse, a new hire? What's the story you tell yourself about maybe being a future manager or what you want to do there? And I think we can all agree that if you want to get to higher levels or you want to be better, you're going to have to encounter that kind of thing. It's like you can't build a muscle without the pain and the stress of building it up there too. And one thing I want you guys to keep in mind also is we all hit the same walls at one point or another. So the difficulties of a new person versus the difficulties of, let's say, a person that's been there for 6 months. I mean, you might hit it. You're going to hit a wall. You're going to hit those obstacles. We can all relate to them. But you can kind of stop when you're at that wall and think, oh, hey, this other person hit that wall too. It's okay for me to slow down or match or anything like that? Or is your story that you look at that wall and you figure, how am I actually going to get over it? Am I going to find a ladder? Am I going to have Joe or Alex boost me up and get over that? Because everybody's hitting those same walls. So for you to be that next best version of yourself or to surpass others or your current capabilities, you've got to overcome that, right? So take some time, maybe you're just thinking about it in the back of your head when you're getting coffee this morning. Maybe it's on the drive home or whatever it might be. Take conscious control of what your story is, and you're going to have to kind of repeat it to yourself a lot too. It's not just something that you can tell yourself once and it's going to be, a magic wand that makes everything better. But what's that story that you tell yourself about? Is it positive or negative about why you had a 0 day, why 0 appointments were set yesterday? Does that have any bearing on that? Or maybe you had a worse month than before, or maybe you're BD and you didn't get quite as many calls in or whatever it might be. So take the time to figure out those stories, repeat it back to yourself. If you need help or anything there, we're there for you. But if you have that very clear idea of what's in your head and that you're going to inevitably hit struggles, and those struggles aren't a sign of badness or weakness or anything bad like that, your attitude's going to be at the top point, and that's going to lead to the most long-term success. And if you need to put a sticky note on your computer, you don't have to have the written out story, but maybe you just put a little star and put it on a sticky note, slap it on your computer so it reminds you, like, what is the story in your head? Is the voice in my head having me deviate from what that story is? Am I thinking less or differently or letting other people impact my story? Or am I making it a good one and I understand that all the good movies, all the good books, all the main characters always have the most intense struggles and they overcome them? So with that, I want to leave it at that, kind of end on a high note. Let me know what Joe or I can do to help there. But take some time, figure out your story, repeat it to yourself, and you're going to slowly see your actions there. You're going to be more direct in your responses to the people you're talking to. There's going to be more confidence overall. You're going to have less friction a lot of the time. And when there is friction, you're going to see it as a beneficial thing. So thanks for listening, and that's all I've got for you guys.